Hey, today I'm talking with Andrew Dittsworth. Andrew, how you doing today?
Good.
Good. So why don't you just tell us a little bit about yourself and kind of like why we are going to have this conversation about the rites of passage and specifically one of the books that you're reading right now.
Yeah, definitely. So, if I were to sum up myself, and if I were to tell you why we're having this conversation, I'd say that the answer is pretty much the exact same. I think that as an individual who's drawn certain energy from the universe, and as an individual who's developed a certain level of awareness, I feel as though, just like yourself, I feel as though there's a lot of things and a lot of concepts and principles and there's just a lot of things that need to be discussed, not just for myself, but for people who maybe have never faced those discussions or have never gone down that road, essentially. And I think it's our responsibility as individuals who have become aware of these types of things. I think it's our responsibility to draw them out, whether it be in conversation or in whatever form. I think it's our responsibility to draw them out and bring them to the table so that other people can understand them. Because at the end of the day, the fact of the matter is they are universal truths. They are things that that govern our lives, and I think it's everyone's right to understand them. So that being said, all the challenges I've gone through in life as a Marine, as a drill instructor, as a husband, as a man, I'd like them all to come out in a conversational tone so that people can kind of understand what's going on in the world. What's going on in each of our world individually and on a broader scale in the universe. So that's why I wanted to have the conversation, and really, just like any other human being, that's who I am. I'm just a human being going through the journey of life, and just like anybody else, I've gone through things, I've been through things, I've triumphed, I've failed. So I'd rather not discuss all of that stuff. I'd rather just say that I'm a human being going through life's journey just like anybody else, but with awareness. And I think that awareness is why I wanted to have this conversation, so that other people could understand what's going on. And then the book is probably what was the catalyst for this conversation. Tribe on homecoming and belonging is a book that you introduced to me, and after reading it, I kind of had a realization that there are certain things, there's more than just a few things that I don't understand about the universe and about life's journey, in its entirety. And those being homecoming and, well, not so much homecoming, but more so belonging. And I think as a man and as a Marine and as a husband, it's one of the things that we struggle with on a daily basis. Trying to figure out how we belong, whether it be in our marriage or whether it be in the Marine Corps or whether it be in the world in general. I think men have a hard time understanding where our identity actually lies. Is it within ourselves? Is it within the things around us? Is it within our wife and our kids? Is it within our job? We have a very hard time identifying that. So the book really made me realize just how much I didn't understand about my own identity, even though I thought I understood it. So after reading the book, I felt as though it made sense to talk about it.
Yeah, until you got to put that ruck on and run 10 miles. And you're like, well,
yeah.
Yeah, maybe I just like the idea of being a Recon Marine.
Yeah. Well, sometimes I wonder if it's the idea, because we don't really know much about what we've never experienced. So I don't know if it's about the idea or the sense of literally just becoming more. Because I can't even name how many times or count how many times I've thought about that or SEALs, martial arts, the list goes on of all those different small communities in the military that, do their great work. But it's never necessarily been about what they do. It's more about what it would take to get to what they do, if that makes sense.
So it sounds like you're saying, like, it isn't the fact of them jumping into some other country, doing something like that. That's cool, but the idea that you have the the stamina and the power and the patience and you have the traits that it takes to get into the teams.
Yeah, I think that's what. Yeah, I think that if people look deeper into why they want to do the things that they want to do, I don't think it has much to do with the action of doing it. You know what I mean? Like because most and people will always say it. They get to that point. They're like, oh, this wasn't what I expected. I can't even. You hear that all the time. This wasn't what I expected. Of course, it wasn't what you expected, but the characteristics, the essentially everything but the actions, those are there, and I think that's what people are really looking for.
That's kind of interesting. Yeah, that's an interesting perspective on it. Yeah, because people like to. You think it falls in line with the same thing as they say it's not the end result, it's the journey is what people are looking for, like in a goal. A goal is set, and when they reach that goal, they get there, and they're like, that's pretty cool, but okay, that makes sense.
Also, it's like, so I was reading I think I told you about this book. It's by Chad Williams. He's a Navy SEAL, and so basically the first part of the book, he talks about how he was in a rut. He didn't know where to go. He didn't know what to do. He was just in a really bad place in life. And one day when he was in the parking lot, he was late to college. He was late to school at whatever university he was going to for whatever degree. He's sitting in the parking lot, and he decided, like, okay, I need to pull myself out of this rut. I'm going to go become a Navy SEAL. The large majority of the book was about him becoming a SEAL and the whole process and him, missions and such. His story in the SEALs, but at the end of the book, he says that when he got there and when he finally became, this SEAL, he wasn't satisfied at all. He felt as though he was still in a rut. So I think when we, in that situation, I think when he said, like, oh, I want to be a SEAL, I think he was talking more about, I want a journey. I want to proclaim something, or I want to become something, is what he was really saying. It just so happened that becoming a SEAL wasn't for him necessarily.
I see what you mean. That's something that we could explore too, is the hero's journey. Have you ever heard that concept?
The hero's journey?
Yes.
Yeah, in the sense that, like finding one's purpose, or.
Yeah, sort of. I mean, yes, it is that, but it's deeper than that. And it's kind of something that is embedded within our. It's embedded within the structures of our psyche as human beings. The human idea and the human concept of the hero's journey is something that it's just embedded in there, wherever it is. Let's just say it that way. It's kind of embedded in the structure of our DNA, right? And the hero's journey is built into many stories, almost all the stories you see. There's an actual structure to that, right?
Right.
And that structure, I'll put a picture of this in the show notes when I do it, but the basic structure of the hero's journey. And if as I go through this, listen to it and think about movies, right, or stories, and think about yourself in this hero's journey. So you take the person, and there's a call to adventure. Okay, so there's a call to adventure. You feel that kind of urge inside your body. Okay, I'm ready to do this. I want to do this. I feel the pull towards this.
Right.
Whatever it is, it's a call to this adventure. Okay, then there's some supernatural aid. So in a movie, if you take a superhero, it's usually some nerdy kid that feels this call to help people. And then there's some kind of supernatural aid within there, right? That supernatural aid would be obviously like Spiderman gets bit by a spider and turns kind of warps into that or whatever. And we're still split up into the known and unknown. So we're still in the known right now. Stuff that could happen that we can foresee, we can kind of picture this other supernatural aid for our reality in this world, not Spider-Man's world, but could be God. You feel God calling you. It could just be universe. Could even be, for some people, maybe their ancestors, right? Just there's some idea that's supernatural. And then, but it's stuff that we know, and it's known to us. And then we cross the line into the unknown, and this is where the challenges and temptations happen, where you also hear people talking about every time I start my goal, something happens. Right? Something goes wrong. Something tries to derail me. Right? And that's what this part is here. These challenges and temptations are happening. So it's the beginning of transformation. So you're going through this transformation because of these challenges, right? And we've talked a lot about challenges too. We could probably do a whole conversation about challenges as well. But the hero is going through these challenges. So you consider the movies again, or any kind of story where the hero has altered his being or her being, and now they're to the unknown, where they've stepped off into this area of the world where they start to do what they thought was their journey. They're helping people. They're doing all the right things, but they end up hitting an emotional kind of rut.
Rut.
It makes sense.
Yeah.
They gotta seek out mentorship, or they gotta seek out somebody to help them. Somebody comes along to help them. It's just this part of the journey where they're moving through that area of life, the challenges and temptations, and as they hit this, it can generally get so overwhelming that they just hit bottom. They come to the abyss, right? And it's called death and rebirth. They hit this abyss, they die. Maybe it's not them dying themselves, but their ego dies. They reborn now as this ultimate superhero that they feel, right? As a rebirth, they're still going to go through transformation and atonement, and then that's still in the unknown with coming back, and then they return back to their normal. And I think a lot of stories end up like that, right back where you began. That's
very true.
Yeah, that's kind of the hero's journey, which is embedded in our the structure of our minds for some reason. I don't know where that came from, but you see it everywhere, right? You see it in the Bible, you see it in stories, story of Jesus. It's the same thing. All these different stories and ideas kind of do that.
Right.
Does that kind of fit in with what you're saying there?
Oh, no, yeah, it does, because I think that individuals who are more in tune with themselves, for example, I'll use an example because you mentioned superheroes. I think the entire time you were talking, I was picturing literally movies that I've seen and how that would incorporate into there. But if you take Stan Lee, for example, the creator of Marvel and all, the various comics that he created, I think I think that was his very own way of essentially depicting, that journey within himself. Because I think that if I've learned anything about people and that exact journey that you're talking about, is that some people are so in tune with it that they actually it's not necessarily act it out, or not necessarily go down that path, but they essentially find a way to what's the word for it? For illustrate it, or to illustrate it, or appropriate it, or make it a visual representation as opposed to just thoughts in their head. And I think that's where like great artists come from, or great songwriters, great baseball players, like all these people that we look at, we're like, wow, they're really good at what they're doing. I think that's their hero's journey coming out of them, if that makes sense. And if you watch all the movies and reading the comics that Stanley inspired and created, they all replicate exactly what you're talking about, the hero's journey. And I was thinking about it. I don't know if you're familiar with the movie Endgame, but Avengers Endgame. But at the end of the movie, after all is said and done, and the missions are completed and the world is saved, Tony Stark ends up dead, and they're having a funeral at the end of the movie. So when you mention that, we all end up kind of back to square one. I think that movie is a perfect representation of that, because at the very end of the movie, they all realize, like, okay, maybe we're not that super, maybe we are still human. So I think that's a good representation of essentially going back to just to ground one, or ground zero, if you will.
Yeah. What was the movie called again?
It's the Endgame, Avengers Endgame. Yeah.
Oh, Endgame, E-N-D.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
Yeah. I haven't heard of that one specifically. There's another one too called Night Shift, I think, or something like that. Have you heard of that one?
Okay. Not off the top of my head, no.
Yeah, somebody else mentioned that one before.
Okay.
Like to hear that, and this could be the same movie for all I know. I'll look them up and put them in there. But that's one of the interesting things. Once I learned the hero's journey, I see it in all the stories now like that. Because like you say, at the very end, they do end up, like, they accomplish the mission. All the evil bad guys are gone, and then they're all just sitting around at the end now, kind of looking like, well, what are we going to do now?
Yeah. Well, I think that if you look at, now that you've introduced me to the concept of the hero's journey, I'm starting to link that to various things. But, I think when it comes down to becoming accepted, maybe that's what people are looking for, is that hero's journey.
As part of their journey, you mean? Or like they're starting to feel pulled in their hero's journey, or?
Well, no, more that in regards to, sorry, I should have made the connection, but in regards to a rite of passage, to some people that might be their only way to experience the hero's journey, which to them, they might not know that. To them, they're just doing what their inner gut is telling them to do. They're just, whatever they're being drawn towards. But maybe that's the only way that they can experience, or not really even experience, but live the hero's journey that they're longing for, if that makes sense, is through a certain rite of passage.
Yeah, that makes sense, because that's part of that supernatural, alteration, right? And because if you think of any of those rites of passage, if you pick one, I always want to lean towards the military, so I'm gonna lean away from the military specifically, just to keep my mind expanding and thinking on the fly here. For those that don't know, there's a rite of passage within the Christian religion, right? And it's this is a big, broad area. So I'm only going to speak specifically the one that I know of for sure that I went through as a young man, going through, going to church with my mom, going to church with grandma. Grandpa was a pastor and everything. And part of that rite of passage that I knew about as probably 6, 7, 8 years old was that they were, I'll say the word grooming. They were grooming us and getting us excited about this period of time that we're going to be baptized. And all the studies led up to this baptism in this church. It was in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, Wilkinsburg. So, kind of all the teachings starting out young in Sunday school was teaching us the stories and teaching us all these different ideas about how all the classes led up to this idea that at some point we were going to be baptized. They didn't pick the time for us. They said that we had to pick it, that we would know the right time. And when we felt that time, when we felt that pull, right there you go into that call to adventure, I would say, in this rite of passage, right? We start to feel this pull from God that it's time for us to take this journey. But to take that journey, you had to go through this rite of passage. And the rite of passage that basically was leading up to was baptism. So anyways, back really going through the classes, and then all of a sudden, at one point I feel this. I think I was probably about 8, and I feel this urge. Okay, I'm feeling all right. It's time. So my job as the student or the person was to go to somebody and tell them, hey, I'm ready. Let's make this happen. Or I feel ready. I guess I couldn't have said I am ready. I might have, but I'm ready. I feel ready. I feel like I'm being called. So I tell my mom. My mom tells, probably grandma. This makes its way. They say, well, the one thing you're going to have to do is go talk to the pastor, which even though it was my grandfather's church, this pastor, at this point, he had already passed away. But so we had a different minister there that I had to go talk to. Pastor, minister, same thing.
Right.
I went there and I talked to him. Yep, that was part of that. Part of that rite of passage was that I had to go to the pastor and say, I believe I'm ready. So the pastor says okay or whatever, and then sets out these steps. You have to do these 8 steps, I think it was, or 7 steps over a period of time. And then he said, how about Easter Sunday? So I agreed to it, and then I did the steps was basically that I was separated out of the rest of the group, put into kind of my own, I would just say, mentorship. And any other person could have been in this with me. It wasn't just for me, but it just so happened at the time it was just for me. I went through these different classes, right, that were a little bit more advanced or involved. I had to do some writing and different things like that, and then go through this and into, I won't call it, it's not necessarily approval, but they want to see if I'm really feeling that pull or if I'm kind of feeling the other side, which we could talk about later, is the idea of group. It's the group think. Am I just doing this because I want to be part of the group, or am I really feeling a call? And so that was the idea behind it. Once they felt that I was really feeling this call, then we set the date for, like I say, Easter, and then baptism. They get everybody at church. It was one of the times my dad came, because he only came to church on that, and he came to church for Christmas. He came to church for like Easter, just specific stuff. So he was either there for me or for Easter. I'm just kidding. He was so cool. So anyways, he came up the front of the church in a gown and everything. They dip you in the water, pull you out, and that's that rebirth, right? Death of the old Matt and rebirth of the new Matt. So that's kind of what that piece was there, right? And that's that rite of passage within the specific Christian faith that I had, which was just basically Southern Baptist, as a set of the Christian. And I know there's many others, even within the Baptist and Christian religion, there's many others. The rites of passage are kind of similar, but different, So anyways, that was something that really I can relate to it as a rite of passage, right? It separated me out and forced me to go through a separate journey to get this passage into the new world, so to speak, the new Matt.
I never heard that. I never even knew that you went through a process like that.
Yeah, that was quite a process for that. Yeah.
Interesting.
Yeah. It was an interesting process, and it did all its magic right at the moment, for sure.
Do you think that caused you to? No, I was just gonna say, do you think that caused you to attach some of your identity to that rite of passage in a sense?
Oh yeah, it's still very vivid even in my memory today.
At the very structure of any rite of passage, I think we're all looking for one thing, and that's identity of some sort, or I don't want to say purpose. I don't like using the word purpose because I feel like it's such a misconstrued, and there's so much, there's so many ways to describe what like purpose is, and I don't think that's the right word. I think the right word is identity, because even with, you mentioned like superhero stories and such, those individuals, when they start out, the movie or the book, whatever the case may be, one of the things that they lack the most is identity. Not many people know who they are. They live a pretty, behind-the-scenes life. In the setting, in the context of their world, they're kind of just there, and that's what generally those movies, that's the context that they open up with. Is here's Peter Parker, Spiderman. He's just this dude, doesn't really have much of a life. He wants the woman, but he can't get her, kind of deal. And then all of a sudden he becomes Spiderman, and now he has identity. Now he has, essentially he has the ability to make a proclamation now. And I think that what I was asking really was, do you think that these rites of passage that we go through, or these processes that we undertake, do you think it just comes down to us literally looking for some way to identify ourselves?
Yeah, that's great. That is interesting, because that's part of that rite of passage, identity for yourself. Are you talking like self-identity, I think, right? Not group identity, whereas what they were trying to avoid for me to go through, or us as young people, was not, the purpose wasn't to identify with the group. Hey, now I'm part of the church, I can take communion. But the self-identity at that moment of, hey, I just accepted Christ and I was baptized, now I am a Christian.
Right. Yeah. I think when you just look at the actions alone, and when you just look at the process alone, or the outcome, or actually, the outcome. Let me refrain from talking about the process. I want to talk about the outcome. If all you look at is the outcome, which is what we do typically as humans, we tend to just look at the outcome and attach to it. All you're seeing is that group, that the collective identity. that's all you see if you look at the outcome. But when you look at the journey, the only person going through that journey is you. And so I think what people are looking for is that identity that's found in the journey, not the identity that's found in the outcome. If that makes sense.
Yeah, that does make sense, because it is you sort of end up getting the, I would say, like the group identity. That result is going to happen. There's no way you can avoid it. It's going to happen. But each individual going through that process, whether to become a Christian, a Navy SEAL, a Marine, a veterinarian, a doctor, anybody that's going through that, they're having their own individual struggles, and they end up with the identity that they, I won't say that they wanted, but they end up with the identity that they built during that struggle.
Oh, right. And if you think about it, this is another interesting part, or another interesting concept, I think, is, if you take if you look at a doctor, if you take an engineer, or if you take a manufacturer, a CEO, these quote unquote identities, you can almost define them. You know what I'm saying? Like there's some way to sit down and write out the definition of the CEO, or define a veterinarian, or define a Marine, or define, you can, almost anybody that takes 5 to 10 minutes to think about it, you can define that. But what you can't define is your own identity. You know what I mean? Like for me to sit down and try to define your identity as Matt Dittsworth, I feel like that's almost impossible. Because whatever I write down is almost guaranteed it's not the same thing you would write down for yourself. You know what I mean? So I think that's why it's so easy for us to attach ourselves to that collective identity, is because it's defined already. It doesn't require me much effort to understand what a Navy SEAL is. You know what I mean? And I say that from a very you can say the same thing about a dog. For example, if somebody were to ask me to, or if you were to if you had to describe the identity of a dog, it's pretty easy. But if a dog had the capability of describing their own identity, it would be very complex, and almost nobody could do that. So I think that just as we attach ourselves to the negative because it's so easy, I think we do the same thing with the collective identity, because it's just it's easy to define. It's easy to say like, oh yeah, I want to be that. But I wouldn't say never, but we don't spend much time thinking about the individual identity that we're actually finding through the journey.
Yeah, that's kind of an interesting point too. I never thought of the idea that going for the known identity versus finding our unknown identity.
Right, like you never hear somebody. Like if you were to ask somebody why you're going to college, you never hear them say like, oh, I'd like to discover, what I feel most drawn towards. Or maybe, if you meet somebody who's very self-aware and very open and has a very expanded mind, maybe. But most out of 10 students in high school, if you ask them like, hey, what are you going to school for, or like what do you want to be when you grow up? It's like, oh, I want to be a doctor. I want to do this. I want to do that. I want to do this. But they're refrained from the journey. I think there's not much spotlight on the journey itself.
Yeah, that's interesting. Yeah, because it makes me think about are there, and this could be a rhetorical question because I already know the answer, but and you probably do too, is they'll say, do people miss, they're on their journey to this group identity, doctor, Marine, / whatever, and they get there, or they take the journey, but they miss the whole point of the journey, they end up being the doctor or the Marine or the SEAL or the firefighter, the police, whatever it is that they had to go through to, whatever their ultimate goal was, they go through the journey, they make it, they get there, but they miss the whole point of the journey itself. Does that make sense? Did you hear the question in there?
Yeah, no, and it is true, and I think that's why so many people say, you said it earlier, when people say like, oh, something happened, like, oh, I want to do this, I want to become a pastor, right, or I want to become whatever, and something got in the way. Well, if they weren't so focused on becoming a pastor and they were more focused on the journey, they would understand that roadblock or whatever it is that's getting in the way, that problem is actually part of the journey. It's an inevitable part of the journey, and it's very easy to it's very easy for myself or you to sit back and say that and understand it. But I think to most people, because they're so oriented to the outcome, and it could be a rite of passage or really anything, they're so oriented towards the outcome that they don't even realize that the journey's taking place. I think we've said the same thing like 4 times now with different, we're using different connotation, but.
Yeah, that's okay. I mean, that's part of this is to dig in and unpack it, because we're unpacking this in real time. So anybody listening right now, that's what you're hearing is like unpacking the ideas. And I'll be honest, I think this is important. This is an important part, and I like this format because it's like real time unpacking. It's we're unpacking it, setting it down, looking at it, saying it different ways, and taking it as what does this really mean to each of us? Because again, this is part of our journey in life, anyways. Is these ideas that are in our head. They can either sit up there as concrete ideas and just like be weights in our heads and like trying to figure it out on our own, or something like this where we can take it, unpack it, look at it in a longer format like this. This is really what personally what I look for in these kind of things, because I want to understand it so that those ideas create those connections to the next thing. And the short ones, 15-minute long, we would have already been done, but we would still be right where we left off, in my opinion. We have a few good quotes, to put on the page, and then hey, let's call it a day. But so I hear you. Yeah, we're definitely saying the same thing over and over in different ways. That's good though. Because it's deep stuff, right? It's stuff that people don't take time to sit down and consider. So hopefully anybody that is listening to this will be able to kind of gather an understanding for themselves in there too. Let's move on. Let's take on to the book that you've been reading, because that's partly why we're talking about rites of passage, right? So if you don't mind, just introduce the book real quick if you want to. If not, I can give a little bit of a synopsis that I remember here. I have a summary pulled up here as well. But just if you want to go ahead and just say the book and then.
Okay, so the book is titled Tribe, and it's by Sebastian Junger. And on the front cover it says on homecoming and belonging. And the most that I can speak on this book as of right now, just because, one, it's fresh on my mind, and two, it seems to speak to me the most, is the belonging portion of the book. And what the author does is he tries to compare, or he essentially argues that in the United States and modern society now, we have a lack of identity, a lack of understanding of who we are. We have a lack of really feeling as though we belong, and even though the book is targeted towards the male audience, it does have a lot to do with the women as well. But in regards to the male audience and belonging, he discusses topics related to tribal living, like with the Native Americans, and he discusses essentially how the differences between tribal living and what we consider to be, modern society living are not only different, but why tribal living benefits not only the collective, the people, but also the individual in feeling as though they belong and actually having some sorts of purpose. That's as much as I can bring out.
So I'll give the definition of tribe, just so there's some idea behind the word tribe, because I think people can kind of get the idea of tribe. Once you say tribe, it's kind of easy to formulate pictures in your mind of what we're talking about. But the definition actually here, just right off of Microsoft Bing, when I do search for tribe, it says a social division in a traditional society consisting of families or communities linked by social, economic, religious, or blood ties with the common culture and dialect, typically having a recognized leader. So there it gives an example of indigenous Indian tribes. And then some synonyms to that: ethnic group, people, race, nation, family, dynasty, house, clan, just giving those kind of things. Then it also talks about being a distinct or close-knit group.
Okay.
Yeah. So that's kind of, I just wanted to say that, so people have an idea of what that means. And that kind of fits that book is about, right? Like you said, the idea of that tribal, the idea of the tribal identity, I guess you could say. Things on my fingers is keep going.
I was just going to say that I think the biggest thing, or the most important thing that the book does, is it differentiates it provides it sheds light on the difference between identity found in societies that do not have a tribal sense, and then those that do have a tribal sense, between those two.
Yeah. Say that one more time. Let me make sure I got that in my head.
I think one of the most important things the book does is it sheds light on the difference between identity found within a group of people that's not tribal, and basically the difference between identity found in a group of people that's not tribal and a group of people that is tribal, and why one is more important than the other.
Okay. Yeah, and then so that's why I just wanted to gather that. And then, so it seemed like the people that aren't part of a tribe have that longing. This is what we were talking about earlier.
Yep.
People that see a tribe, they look at that, they're like, hey, you know what? I want to be part of that tribe. Just to keep using the same word, it's, to fit with the book conversation. Want to be part of that tribe or that group. Yeah. That's interesting. Yeah, that's an interesting perspective as well. There's a story. I don't know if you've heard the story of I should look it up here, and I'll put the story. I'll look up the actual story. But there was a lady that was basically kidnapped by an Indian tribe back in the 1800s. Let me go here. I think her name was Olive Oatman.
Okay.
But basically, she was. If this isn't her, I will fix it. But this looks like a similar story. So, anyways, she was a girl. She was kidnapped by an Indian tribe. They brought her into their tribe, basically. Probably not for good reasons at first. For probably things that warring. People that are at war, unfortunately, use these tactics. but that's just, that's the way things were. That's what they did. In this particular story, they brought her into the tribe, and she ended up being there for many years, over 30 years. And she ended up even having children within this tribe.
Oh, wow.
And what happened later on was that she was quote unquote rescued by the Army, by the U.S. Army.
Okay.
And they brought her back out and put her back into regular American society at the time, and she rejected it and ended up running back to be with the tribe that initially kidnapped her. That's kind of what it reminded me of, the way you were talking about that. You got the tribe mentality, and then you got the people that are not in the tribe but would want to be in a tribe.
What you were about to say is essentially what I was about to say, is that even young men, they would see the way that the Native American men were acting, that the tribal men were acting, and they would get a sense of what it was like to be like them, and any time that they would leave their colonies to go join the Native Americans, they never came back, and it's because they found that that belonging. And I think the woman you mentioned probably found the exact same thing.
Yes. Yeah, that's kind of an interesting piece to that idea of tribalism too, and that wanting to be part of a group. And once you're part of that group, you want to, if you find that group to be part of your self-identity too, I guess you really just you don't want to leave it. You want to stay with that feeling, stay with that group, because you feel safe and other things. So yeah, pretty good idea behind that one too.
Mm-hmm. Well, one thing that just popped into my mind is, we learn about this, we hear about this in middle school and elementary school, and even high school too, obviously. But that kids who join on the tribal topic, kids who join a tribe such as gangs, they're looking for a sense of identity. They're looking for that sense of family, that tribal sense, and it's the same reason people join gangs and feel as though they can never leave them.
Yeah, same kind of deal there, and the tribe there wants to keep them.
Yeah, exactly.
Makes it almost a rite of passage to get in, and if they want to get out, another rite of passage to get back out. That's kind of an interesting perspective too. One of the things in that book that he talks about, I remember here, also looking at a summary, is that humans don't mind hardship. In fact, they thrive on it. He said what they mind is not feeling necessary.
Yes.
Yeah, so that kind of idea of feeling necessary.
Well, it's just funny because every time that we and a quote is introduced or we're talking about this, we keep talking about emotions and feelings, right? And I just find it interesting how emotionally driven a rite of passage actually becomes. It's almost, it'd be like looking at the difference. So the journey would represent the emotional attachment, and the emotional, it's more of an emotional journey, where the outcome are the facts. You know what I'm saying? Like the hard facts. I don't know if that makes sense. What I'm really trying to say is that it's an emotional journey.
Yeah, for sure. You're gonna probably tie a lot of emotion to that journey if you're really pouring yourself into it. If it's something that you really want. Anything worth having, you have to work for. You ever heard that? I'm sure, right?
Oh yeah.
So that passage is that journey, that emotional piece that you have to go through to get what you want in life.
So I just wrote this down because it just came on mind. Would you say that the rite of passage itself is essentially created inside of us. It almost doesn't even exist outside of us if you think about it. Because, and just for an example, let's say being baptized, right? You mentioned being baptized and how that was a rite of passage for you. If we were to take another individual and put them through that same rite of passage, right? And they went through the same rite of passage and ended up coming out on the other side, but nothing changes. Because obviously it was a rite of passage for you, but what makes it a rite of passage for you is the fact that you changed from it. So for another person to go through that and not change and to not have any emotional attachment to it, it's not even a rite of passage. So I think it's important for us to mention in this discussion that it's very possible that the only way it becomes a rite of passage is if there is an emotional attachment to it. Because if not, it's just a bunch of random things that you're doing, just essays you're writing, or just tasks, but they're not emotion-saturated tasks. They're just tasks that you're completing. Does that make sense?
Yes, 100%. Yeah, the emotions probably are the tie. You're right. Yeah. The emotions are what's going to tie you to it, because I've also seen people go through these rites of passages that weren't emotionally invested in it, and when they do complete the task, they do make it to the other side, but they're exactly the same person they were on the other side. So there was no real transformation for them. Therefore, they don't hold it as valuable.
Yeah, I was just going to relate it to something that I was thinking about, because being a drill instructor, I see all the time. You see a recruit from day one, and then you see a recruit at the end of it, and they're always that are the exact same. And then we see them in the fleet too, out in the Marine Corps. We see them, and nothing really changed for them. And it's because they just went through the motions. They just did the task. They just made it through. But there was no emotional attachment to becoming a Marine. So
the other day I was working in the Photoshop advanced class, right? And to me, I would say right now I'm going through a process or a journey to become, to identify with the artist, right? Or become somebody who is considered an artist, or has some kind of contribution to the creative world, right? Which was definitely not me the first, I'll say the first, at least the first 28 years of my life, but definitely the first 35 years, 40 years, no creativity, or not using my creativity. Well, I'm sitting in this class, and the teacher, the instructor says, do this, and that, and you'll have this end result. Well, this is the same time my mind blanked out for some reason. I didn't hear nothing. I didn't hear anything he said.
Yeah.
So I hit the little microphone button, and I said, I was like, hey, Steve, could you tell me the steps to that again? And he did. He went through the steps and everything, told me how to do it, and I got it, and I did it, and it's like, oh, wow, that worked. Well, what happened next is really the profound moment, which I'm just connecting here. He paused the recording, and then he said, he gave a little bit of spiel about something, and then he says, oh, and by the way, I'm not teaching you steps. I'm teaching you concepts. I don't want you to learn the steps to these concepts. I want you to learn the concept of, at that moment, was something like, changing the color values to fit the more natural world, or the creativity that I'm trying to create here, or the piece that I'm trying to create. So I'm trying to teach you a concept, he said, because there's so many different steps you could take. You could take the steps I just told you, or you could take these other steps. So the idea was that he's not teaching steps. And the reason that the connection I'm trying to make here is that you were just talking about the emotions and people just kind of going through the tasks, or just going through the motion to become whatever. There's no attachment to that. And even in this world, in the Photoshop world, he was trying to teach me the concept of it. And I was just trying to stick to the steps of it. So I had no real emotional attachment to it. Just what are the steps? That's all I need to know. So that's what I was connecting there.
Right. And what I got from that is that he was not teaching you how to develop an outcome. He was teaching you how to go on a journey.
Yes. Yeah. You say, here's what you want. There's many ways to get there. So it's not to concentrate on the steps. It's to concentrate on the how to get there. Because if I concentrate the steps, I'll get the same outcome every single time. But if I understand the concept of it, then I can expand that concept. I can't expand the steps.
I keep thinking of math. Every time that we talk about steps or like focusing on the outcome, all I think of is math, because there's only one way to do, 1 plus 1. There's only, you know what I mean. And if you're most people I feel like are so outcome focused that's all they're focused on is how to do the process, but they're not. Yeah, and we've said it many times, but.
Yeah, well, even in that kind of case, you could say the concept of the numbers, right? Because you've heard the same 1 plus 1 equals 11, right?
11, yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. 2 plus 2 equals 22. You can also consider it that way too. But yeah, the steps of math are pretty concrete for the most part. Like if you're really doing the math, the outcome.
Yes.
Generally, at least at the basic levels of math, is step by step. You get the outcome that's supposed to happen.
Right.
Yeah, pretty interesting.
But life is by no means like that at all.
Yeah, that's very true. Because I know people that take steps. They just take the steps because somebody tells them. I had another guy that I was trying to teach about the system that I use at work, and I was trying to teach him how to teach it. He kept regurgitating the words that I was using. Yeah, so I kept telling him, like, stop saying what I'm saying. You don't have to say the same words. I'm not teaching, and I don't know if I used this with him. I'm not teaching you the words to use. I'm teaching you what you're supposed to be telling them. So take what I tell you and then put it in your own words, because you don't sound right if you're saying it like me.
Yeah.
That's crazy. So you hear some cool connections being made, which means learning's happening, right? Hopefully, at least in my head.
Yeah, definitely. Well, and I needed to have this conversation, but I like to think that content like this is so important to other people, because what's happening for me personally inside is I've been on this little journey on my own for the last 2 weeks of really understanding what it means to go through a rite of passage, because my life in the Marine Corps is almost defined by such a concept, being a rite of passage and really finding identity. So having this conversation, I was very excited for it because it has profound meaning to me in the sense that I'm trying to understand it, and I think that's why it's so important for whoever's listening to this. We're not just filling in the blanks here. We're talking about it, and it has meaning to both of us. So I think it's very important for the listener.
Yeah, for sure. And there'll probably be some listeners that are just listening to the words and trying to just do the steps through the words. But I'm hoping that there'll be a few that listen to it and take the notes and then reflect for themselves. So that's good too. Yeah, it's part of that thing. Yeah, unpacking it and understanding it. I think that a lot of people just don't want to understand. They want to keep life at the very surface, hoping things work out, instead of diving deep into it and figuring, what is life? What does this mean? What is the purpose of this this time that we're on Earth.
That's what it all boils down to, is really just understanding, especially with stuff like this, because when you're exposed to it and you realize, like, wow, this is actually happening, you know, I think a lot of people don't. I think when a lot of people hear about these concepts, or they, the second they try to, expand their mind to that degree, they start to realize that this stuff is actually in effect. This is stuff that's actually happening, you know, right in front of them, and that's scary. You know, I think that's scary to a lot of people.
Yeah. Do you think it has to do with, well, if I understand it, then I'll have to possibly take action? You think that has to do with it, or like they're afraid of the understanding?
I know it has something to do with it, because I've experienced that personally, you know, and I think anybody has. You know, I know I'm sure you have, and even, you know, you told me about your experience with the Photoshop class. Not today, but we had a conversation a couple of days ago. We were at Jared's family's place. He told me about a profound experience with the Photoshop, and when it may have been there, or may have been the weekend prior, but nonetheless, the context is there. You know, you told me that the professor essentially put you in your place, and you know, most people when they're put in a place like that, they take it very personally, and it affects them in such a manner like it's a lot of weight. But because you understand that it's part of the process, and because you know that this stuff exists, you experienced it differently than somebody else would. And so I think that when we realize that, you know, we start to realize that we have more responsibility than we actually do. We start to recognize that we do have purpose, and you know, for a lot of people, even realizing that you have more purpose than just living in the house. Like, there's so much to it that I think that's what scares people. To answer your question, that was a very long-winded answer, but yes, I do think that that's what scares people.
Yeah, I like long-winded answers.
Yeah.
So that's a good example too, that Photoshop thing. Yeah, because I did tell you when he did that. Basically, my mind shut down at that point when he was doing that. And it only took another 5 minutes, and then a glitch in the computer for me to just quit. And I just when the glitch happened, I just never connected back in, you know, for the last 30 minutes of class. Because I let that get in my head so much that, like, you know what? Yeah, okay, maybe I'm not going to be a Photoshop guy because I can't figure this stuff out. And, you know, maybe my concept of art is just is wrong. So, yeah, it could have very easily tumbled into a well, forget it, I'll just stick to what I'm doing. Instead, you know, he called me that night. I just ignored the phone call, and then the next day, I called him back. You know, it's like, okay, here's what happened. Told him the truth. You know, I was frustrated. I didn't necessarily say I was frustrated with the way you critiqued my thing, because that's irrelevant. That's his job. But I told him I was just frustrated. You know, and that frustration led to me just stopping the call for myself. Yeah. Because I wasn't learning anything. Yeah. That's a good example. Right. That's a great example of a way that people can get derailed from their journey as well. So, but I'm back on track now. So, because you're exactly right, I learned a long time ago that there's going to be many hardships. I'm going to be pummeled down, you know, if I'm trying to make a whole shift of mindset. Right. It doesn't come easy, so I got to go through that rite of passage of, you know, the critiques and the learning part of it, of, you know, somebody that's ahead of me in the journey, making course corrections and making sure sometimes it's got to be a harsh course correction.
You know what might be interesting? What might be interesting for you to do is interview people and ask them what they consider to be rite of passages in their life.
Yeah, that'd be good. Yeah, I'll probably throw that in there as a good question.
Yeah, because what you just mentioned, and it's funny listening to you talk, and then you interjected the word rite of passage or the phrase rite of passage, but I wouldn't have used the word rite of passage in that context, but you did because you had such an emotional attachment to it. You know what I mean? So I think it'd be interesting to ask people, where in their life they experience rites of passage, because I don't think there's just one. I think we go through. I mean, rites of passage is really just it's another way of saying transformation. So really, when you're asking somebody, where have you experienced a rite of passage, what you're asking them is, where have you experienced transformation in your life? So I think that'd be pretty interesting.
Oh yeah, I'll add that in as a question, just to see what I can pull out of people, because some people probably don't consider it too many times.
Exactly. Yeah.
I bet you people would say, like if you just asked me that, if we were just talking, and I would tell you, well, probably I wouldn't have told you about the baptism at first, because I didn't necessarily think of it that way till we started talking. But the one that would definitely come to my mind first would be boot camp, where there was a great transformation for me there. And then probably the next big one would be that would just jump out at me would be when I pick up chief in the Navy. That was a 6-week rite of passage that I emotionally attached, so much that I even came to the point of breaking down in tears at one point, because I didn't know what in the hell they wanted, what in the hell I was supposed to be doing. It seemed simple, but it was so crazy. Yeah. But one that, as I'm talking now, jumps out as a rite of passage was getting married, right? Going through.
I was really just to bring that up.
That's funny. That rite of passage, and why that little piece is important of going through that moment in time where you're getting married, the commitments and stuff that have to be there, the emotional attachments, and I don't know if the attachment is the right word. That's probably that's not a good word. The emotional energy that's there. Yeah, definitely another one for sure.
You think that if more people were to look at their marriage or certain parts of their marriage as a rite of passage to their loved one, you know what I mean? Like do you think that if more people were to look at that process as a rite of passage, do you think that they would have healthier marriages?
Yes, I believe that would be the case, and I've often thought too that it should be much easier. It should be much harder to get married. It should be very simple to get a divorce, in my mind, right? It should be very hard to get married.
Oh man!
I think it should be a rite of passage, That reminds me of that movie. There's a movie that's
License to Wed, and they have to go through this process.
Yeah.
They have to go through a process where they essentially earn the right to marry.
Marriage boot camp. You got to go through 13 weeks of boot camp first, and then.
Oh man! Imagine the effect that would have on people. For some people though, I think marriage becomes a rite of passage, or the process to becoming married becomes a rite of passage, because, and I can speak from experience with Nella. There was never, like, whenever I met her and whenever we started dating, and we started learning more about each other, and I started to learn who she was and what she was doing in life and about her journey. Falling in love with that became the fuel of the rite of passage, if that makes sense. So I never felt as though marriage was like the defining moment necessarily. I still feel as though the journey is the defining moment, because, and I think that it goes back to what we said earlier, is that we create our own rites of passage within us because of the emotional attachment. I don't like that word either. The emotional drive that we have, or the emotional energy that's developed through that journey. And what I'm wondering, because meeting her family was a part of that passage. Meeting you guys was a part of that passage, and really every day is almost like, it's crazy to think about it now. It's actually giving me goosebumps. Every day is literally a rite of passage in a sense. You know what I mean? And I'm wondering if people just don't see it that way. Like, I wonder if people, really, I bet you people are just so attached to the concept of quote-unquote marriage and what it is, like the visual representation of marriage and what it is, the certificate, you know what I mean? Like, I think that's what people are so attached to, and they forget about everything else.
Yeah, it goes back to what we were saying about steps. Some people just take the steps.
So crazy. Yeah.
Yeah, what do we need? Yeah, we want to be married. Here's what we have to do. Okay, do it. And then they're married. And then, okay, now what?
Now what? And then that's the question that I think people ask is now what? And it's funny in our society, right? We attach it's funny because we attach a duration of time to it. So it's like, oh, you've been dating for 7 years. Like, why aren't you married yet? Like, why haven't you taken that step, quote unquote? But
yeah, that's right. Yeah,
I'm almost willing to bet that there's hundreds of couples out there that are extremely happy together that have probably never taken the quote unquote step of getting married. Maybe they've held a ceremony, or maybe they've done that, but whether or not they took the stamp and stamped on there that they're certified married, like, that almost doesn't even matter, to be honest.
Yeah, I know people that have done that. Basically, they just they just, I think the word is cohabit. They just basically they are in their world. They're married. They're together. They're the marriage piece, that ceremony piece, or that paper piece is not important to that couple. So they just live their life like that. They get everything they want out of the relationship without that piece of it. And there's different arguments behind why they should take that step and all that, but if they're happy and they feel like they're going through their life in a way that they want to do it, then they're already living their life. Their journey is in process, and they're going to their place. So even that's the case too. Yeah, like if we think there has to be a rite of passage, that doesn't mean there necessarily has to be a specific rite of passage into something like that.
Right, and as we said, the rite of passage is customizable to you. It's what you. I don't mean to quote such a famous quote, but it's what you make it.
Yeah, say it again.
I was just saying that I don't like using commonly used quotes in discussions, but it is what you make it.
It is what you make it. Yeah. Yeah, that's the journey too. Yeah. That's like full circle back to saying, when you tie your emotions to it, if you can do that, and you'll get much more out of it, or you can just do it step by step and it'll still happen, but it won't have that lasting effect. So, yeah, another cool full circle there.
Oh yeah, and it's just funny because a lot of the stuff has been built up, stuff that's been boiling at the top for a while. But it makes me realize I just need to do stuff like this more often. whether it's discussing it with you or discussing it with myself in writing or in audio, something.